back, and thank you for joining us for this Fox 13 News special presentation. For the next half hour, we are bringing you a selection of Fox 13's 360 reports. We launched the series of reports just over a year ago now. The idea is to take a single topic and hear from a variety of viewpoints to allow varied perspectives. We've covered topics that affect Utah like human trafficking, the deployment of solar energy, development rather, and controversial wild horse roundups, just to name a few. Tonight, we are going to kick things off with Fox 13's Bob Evans, who's asking the question, where did all the workers go?
We just can't find the people to be here.
Chase Clark owns Timberline Wholesale Appliance in American Fork.
You can see we've made it pretty good our first year.
Oh, yeah. Business is booming, even though employees are hard to come by.
The challenge is you bring somebody in, you interview them. If you let them walk out that door, they're not coming back because they'll go somewhere else. We had a secretary that we offered $22 an hour to, and she went over to Adobe and she's gone.
A truck driver making roughly the same wage.
He came back in, worked one day, and that was it. He wanted his paycheck the next day and he was gone. I think it was harder than what he wanted for what he can go out there and get.
There are lots of options for those looking for work.
If I had 5,000 people here right now, I could have them all working within a day or two.
Brett Van Leeuwen owns Synergy Staffing in Taylorsville, a temp service with a long history of pairing people with jobs.
We need people in restaurants, people in stores, shops.
Are you a quick learner? Are you open to warehouse and production type work?
But Synergy's biggest clients are companies looking to fill light manufacturing and labor jobs.
We're all struggling to get the numbers for them.
Where'd all the workers go?
Boy, if you find them, we'd like to know where they went.
We have more jobs now than we did before COVID. Idaho's the only other state like that.
Mark Nold with the Department of Workforce Services is Utah's chief economist.
This is the .com, that's the Great Recession, there's the pandemic.
He says the issues behind all the open positions were in play long before the pandemic.
We were pretty well a maxed out economy, and what I mean by that is the maximum amount of people 16 and older that were willing to come out and get a job. We pretty much had hit that ceiling.
Utah and other western states have seen steady job growth in recent years, while some of America's past production powerhouses have been in decline.
Most of our development in our history has been all around us. Industrial revolution, big physical products in factory settings. You need flat lands, you need flat roads, you need oceans, rivers, lakes to move those things.
As more jobs become technology-based,
the internet, the computers, it could care less about geography. In fact, the whole dynamic is flipped. People want to come here and recreate and live, and there's the economic opportunities are there, and it's like a vacuum. And
aside from the regional trends which created more jobs needing to be filled, Noel believes answers to the question, where did all the workers go, are found in research done by a nonprofit called the Conference Board, which has been researching national business and economic trends for more than a century. They've specifically identified 5 reasons, starting with massive retirement of baby boomers.
For every 2 workers, so to speak, that retires, you have maybe 1.5 that's available to come in behind it.
And that has ties to the birth rate. With Utah on the left and the United States on the right, the lower part of this graphic shows the younger generations advancing toward the labor force.
If our demographics hold as they are now, in the next 10 to 15 years, you're actually shrinking the labor supply.
Next, the population of non-college graduates is shrinking.
For years, we have been educating our labor force, which is a good thing. But you can get to a point where you can out-educate the economy for the amount of jobs and the education levels of the jobs.
Remember those thousands of jobs available at Synergy Staffing?
The true blue-collar workers, the numbers are dwindling.
A large increase in disability rates among Americans is also taking more people out of the workforce. And single men without college degrees are less likely to be in the labor force. Their decline in participation is due in part to social trends. Young men are staying single and living with their parents longer and have less of a need to earn money.
Where's all these young kids? I don't know. You know, where they at? I really don't know.
For the time being,
we definitely try to hire people on the spot now. We're offering a lot more money than we would in the past.
Many employers are raising wages to attract applicants.
Now $15, yeah, you're good luck. It's tough to find anybody.
But long-term solutions will be needed to curb inflation and sustain the economy.
We need blue-collar people.
Van Leeuwen wonders if a well-managed program to allow laborers into the country, at least temporarily, could be the answer. And not just from Mexico, but countries like Italy, where unemployment rates are high.
I believe that's the only solution that we have, is to allow people to a little easier method to come into the States.
Let the economy shrink, bring in more in-migration, or replace labor for artificial intelligence. And I don't see shrinking the economy as an option, so I think the other two, or the combination of those other two, would be how we will address it going forward.
Bob Evans, Fox 13 News, Utah.
For those looking for work, there are a lot of opportunities out there right now. Many companies are offering signing bonuses in addition to even higher starting wages. Still to come, what is downtown Salt Lake City missing as it plans and builds for the future? I take a 360 look at that issue. And we're going to take you to the shrinking Great Salt Lake and ask what it will take to save it. Thanks again for joining us on this New Year's Eve. It is no secret, Salt Lake City is booming, but what does Utah's capital city still need? That's the question I asked of a planning director, a tourism promoter, business owners and residents earlier this year.
We're really not missing a lot. Salt Lake is one of the few destinations of our size with a professional symphony, a professional opera, a professional ballet.
Karen Bowe is with Visit Salt Lake. It's her job to promote the city to the rest of the world.
We really are a modern mountain hub of the West.
A massive new convention center hotel is rising. More apartment and office buildings are on the way. But not all of us will live or work in them. And buildings alone do not make a great city. What would it take to make Salt Lake a better city? So I asked a handful of people on the sidewalks of Salt Lake where they think the focus should be.
When we were in downtown yesterday with the kids, there wasn't a lot for them to do and they weren't that interested.
It's like easy to say, way harder to implement, but a more booming arts scene, and not just like fine art.
More parks and just areas where people can get together and just like meet other people. That's really important.
That last idea is the one that resonates most with Salt Lake City Planning Director Nick Norris.
The top thing that I would put on my list would be completing a true green loop of our downtown. So around the edges, having linear parks and big places for people to go.
However, parks are not the priority of most people reaching out to his office.
Housing is almost always the first thing that we hear.
Affordable housing, to be more specific.
People look around and they see these tall buildings and, you know, all these apartments being built. But there's a lot of housing types and price points that we're missing.
The second most common concern?
Safe ways to get around downtown that don't require a car.
While the city greenlights new construction and looks for long-term housing and transportation solutions that may include expanding tracks or streetcars into neighborhoods, some small business owners feel left out of the planning. Unique shops like Ken Sanders' Rare Books,
you name it, we got them.
Give a city character if they can survive.
You look out the front door of my bookstore and you can see 6 cranes of buildings going up, 10 stories, 20 stories, 31 stories across the street, and then we're next.
He's rented this building for the past 20 years, never with an option to buy it from an investment group that plans to redevelop the land it sits on in just a couple of years. Sanders has moved locations before, but this time there may be nowhere to move to, as small, affordable spaces disappear.
They're putting us out of business one by one, and it's almost like a systemic genocide.
Sanders says tax breaks and other government incentives to aid businesses in relocating are only extended to big corporations like Amazon.
That are going to suck the money out of our city and send it elsewhere. So some guy that I think his name is Bozo can fly himself to outer space. The only mistake he made was coming back.
This neighborhood stays pretty vibrant most days, even on the weekends.
On the capital city's west side, the influx of people and housing seems to benefit the Pioneer Park area, where Matt Caputo's family has done business for decades. What changes would he like to see in the future?
I think that architecture, especially in great cities, like some of the ones we talked about, it's meant to stand for centuries. And I don't see a lot of that.
He also says if liquor laws changed, allowing businesses to purchase at wholesale prices like they do in other states, it would make local restaurants more profitable, ushering in more and better dining options downtown. Matt also hit on another concern shared by many.
One thing to make our city a better city is to really get serious about clean air.
Lots of ideas there. Ken Sanders, who you saw there in my story, says his current bookstore is closing. He will be moving to the Leonardo on Library Square sometime in 2022. Still to come in our 360 special, the Great Salt Lake is shrinking. Fox 13's Ben Winslow breaks it down, why it matters, and what it will take to save the lake. The Great Salt Lake has been shrinking for several years, and with the drought of 2021, it reached a new record low. And even if you never visit the Great Salt Lake, its size can impact your health as well as the state's economy. Here's Fox 13's Ben Winslow.
From its all-time high in 1986 until now, the Great Salt Lake has been shrinking. Now it's looking not so great. It's got scientists, environmentalists, and political leaders worried, especially as Utah's drought emergency continues to worsen.
The more water we save, the more water that is available to run into the Great Salt Lake. And so we're working with scientists with our various departments and nationally on what it's going to take to make sure that we keep those levels high enough to keep that ecosystem viable, because we can't lose that ecosystem.
The Great Salt Lake helps generate snow for our mountains. It's a refuge for millions of migratory birds, and it generates a lot in mineral extraction, brine shrimp, and tourism. But now, water levels are so low, boats have been pulled from the marinas, which are now running dry, and the lake's islands are no longer islands. It's estimated the lake shrinking over the past several decades has exposed more than 750 miles of lake bed.
I personally have visited all 750 square miles of the lake bed on a fat bike.
Dr. Kevin Perry, a professor of atmospheric sciences, is doing experiments on the lake bed.
Determine if there were any heavy metals that might be of potential concern for the residents of the Wasatch Front that might be breathing that.
And what'd you find?
So one of the things that I found is that there are several contaminants of potential concern. And arsenic is one of those contaminants. It has naturally high concentrations in the soil here in Utah.
The water used to keep it covered. Now that the lake bed is exposed, it could start blowing right into our communities.
I don't want to be an alarmist and say that we have significant exposure to arsenic because the research is ongoing to find out how frequently we are actually exposed to this arsenic. And we would have to be exposed quite frequently in order for it to pose a potential health concern. But that is only part of the issue. The particulate matter that comes off of the lake in and of itself, regardless of its chemical composition, is unhealthy when the concentrations reach high enough.
That makes our air pollution problems even worse. There's many reasons this is happening, and the drought is one of them.
Climate change will alter the amount and the timing of the precipitation that we get, and will alter the mix of rain versus snow that we get in the mountains.
There's also how much water is getting into the lake.
Like many other terminal basin lakes around the world, we've seen that pressures to use the water before it gets to the lake.
But Dr. Perry says it's not too late.
I'm always an optimist that people will recognize that we have a wonderful resource here and that we do not want to lose it. We do not want to be known as Dry Lake City.
It's not good news. The state has the legal responsibility in the Utah Constitution to preserve and protect this system as a public trust for the people of Utah in perpetuity.
Linda Freitas leads Friends of Great Salt Lake, an environmental group dedicated to protecting the lake. She says the Great Salt Lake is vital for many reasons.
This system is both ecologically significant, hemispherically. Millions of migratory birds come through. They rely on this system to rest, to stage, to nest on their migratory journey. And it's also an economic generator for the state of Utah to the sum of $1.32 billion annually through mineral extraction, brine shrimp harvesting, and tourism and recreation.
The Great Salt Lake has been an attraction and an industry for the state, but since statehood, there's been some issues.
The open water of Great Salt Lake it's not considered a beneficial use. It is not entitled to a water right.
No beneficial use means the water that gets to the lake ends in the lake, even though there are a lot of other benefits once it's there. DeFreitas says that legal term increases the pressure to use up all the water in farms and in developing communities, ultimately harming the state with increased air pollution and other problems.
We need to conserve our water. We need to reduce our water use and recognize a change in behavior for freeing up water, but in order to make it come to the lake, we have to ensure that the stewardship of that water being freed up is going to get here, because there's a lot between there and here.
DeFreitas says it's not too late to save the Great Salt Lake.
I would like people to contact their legislators. I would like people to contact the governor. I would like them to express their concern about a shrinking Great Salt Lake and our responsibility as stewards to perpetuate this system.
It's really impossible to overstate just how serious the situation is.
Representative Timothy Hawks sponsored a resolution in 2019 calling for increased awareness and protection of the Great Salt Lake.
The good news is that the conversation today is so much better than the conversation, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago, when really any water that made it to the lake was considered wasted. And so we've started to change that, where people start to realize, hey, this lake, it touches me in different ways. It's tied to our air quality. It's tied to our snowpack. I mean, even something as simple as a soda can that somebody picks up has magnesium from the Great Salt Lake.
He doesn't believe it's too late.
Here's the good news. The lake, even at these low levels, is still meeting most of its what we call beneficial uses, right? So the industries are still out there. The birds are still there. The brine shrimp are still there. If the lake continues to go lower, we start to see some of those problems. Costs are going up for industry. They can only sustain that for so long. And as the water tends to concentrate down, it gets too salty even for brine shrimp.
But he acknowledges policymakers are a long way from having a big picture solution for the lake.
First and foremost, we need greater legal recognition for the value of water that's left in the lake. In the eyes of the law, even today, all of that water that reaches the lake is considered wasted. And the system's really set up to kind of get everybody to use the water before it gets to the lake so that it's bone dry. Well, that's a problem.
Other ideas being considered include expanding water banking, where water rights can be bought or borrowed for someone downstream. There's also more of a push for water-wise agriculture use, including new technologies and techniques to grow crops.
We need to come up with tools that allow us to get water into the lake that are really kind of a win-win. It's not just taking from one person and putting it in the lake, but all of us working together, doing our part to help protect this vital resource.
Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Next week, Utah House Speaker Brad Wilson is hosting a summit on the Great Salt Lake, all to discuss possible policy solutions with fellow lawmakers, industry leaders, and environmentalists. We'll keep you updated on that. Thank you for watching our Fox 13 News 360 special. We have more 360 reports coming your way in the new year. QuickCast is next.